Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Building Brands People Love. I'm Lauren Scharf, one of the organizers of Filling the Gap. For those of us joining us for the first time, you are in for one hell of a ride. Filling the Gap is a community built to bridge the worlds of tech, data, marketing, and equity. We bring together leaders, builders, and thinkers to have that kind of honest conversation that leads to real impact, not just in our businesses, but the people we serve. We've been doing this now for over 10 years, and we couldn't be prouder of the community we've all built together. Each of our events supports the Barbara Schleifer Commemorative Clinic, a Toronto organization that provides legal, counseling, and interpretation services to women, gender diverse, and non-binary survivors of violence. Your presence here today directly supports this work, so thank you. As we share ideas this morning, we're also helping create safety, justice, and dignity for others in our city. Before we dive in, I'd like to acknowledge that we're gathered here today on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities. We honor the Indigenous communities who have cared for it for generations and acknowledge our shared responsibility to build respectful relationships moving forward. An event like today doesn't happen by accident. I want to take a moment to give a huge shout out to our incredible Filling the Gap volunteers who hustled behind the scenes to make today possible. Amanda Gilroy, I'm looking, not here, all right, Amanda Gilroy, Beth Thomson, like little awkward clap. Let's make her a little uncomfortable. Jade Liu, Bella Ianetta, not here but here in spirit, Abby Musa, and Janice Liu. We got to make 2 or 3 of them uncomfortable, so thank you. This morning's conversation, Building Brands People Love, gets to the heart of why we do what we do. In a world of endless noise, fleeting attention, no shortage of distractions, how do we create something that genuinely resonates? It's no longer just enough to be recognized. The goal is to show up, listen, and create value that goes beyond just a transaction. To do that, we have a powerhouse panel. We have our moderator, Beth Thomson, who is head of strategy at Hearts and Science and also part of our Filling the Gap team. Beth brings a global perspective to brand strategy and social impact, having worked across the UK and now Canada. She's a big believer that becoming a loved brand isn't about perfection. It's about authenticity and creating work that truly matters. Joining her, we have Sarah Chamberlin in the blue. Slow clap, right? She is CMO and VP at the CAMH Foundation and is a driving force in the movement to inspire support for mental health in Canada. With a background spanning the tech sector at BlackBerry to her current post at CAMH, Sarah is passionate about challenging stigma and leveraging powerful storytelling to provide hope and help. Next up, we have Maria Acevedo, I'm not even giving you credit when I jumped right in. A growth-driven marketing leader who has spent over 15 years scaling iconic brands that you may or may not know, such as Mondelez, AB InBev, to Greenhouse Juice Co., where she launched a mere 50 products. Maria is a master of disciplined innovation and building high-performing teams with a deeply commercial mindset. And last but not least, we have Brian Neumann, head of brand and creativity at Kraft Heinz. Brian's career mantra is doing cool shit that people notice. And Brian, I really, really hope that's on your business card. Just say yes. And his track record proves it. But whether it be the Heinz Tilted Label or the Marvel Ryan Reynolds partnership, he has numerous Cannes Lions and Effies to his name. He's a leader in hacking culture to earn genuine consumer attention. I'm now the only thing standing in the way between you and becoming a loved brand. It's a bit of housekeeping and then a very genuine thank you. If you need to go to the washroom, straight out to the left, Okay, I didn't mess that part up. And again, a very, very big thank you from all of us for supporting not just Filling the Gap this morning, but the Barbara Schleifer Clinic.
Okay. Thanks everyone again for coming. Excited to dig into this and our amazing panel. We're going to start how we always start, with a quick fire round where our panel have strict instructions for just a one-word answer. I'm going to start with the first question, and I'm going to start with you, Brian, and then we'll go along. Your all-time favorite brand is, and you cannot say your own.
Abercrombie, best brand turnaround. More words, sorry.
Forum snowboards.
The Great Frog.
Beekeepers, natural, which is propolis spray. Obsessed.
Got a clap in the audience. Okay, next question. The campaign you wish you'd created. Maria, we'll start with you.
Oatly deprogramming zone with dairy at the Capitol Hill.
So much respect for so much work, but I haven't seen it yet.
Bonos.
You Up by IKEA. Really smart media placement, drawing consideration a category no one's considering for simple, clever voltage.
Okay, next question. If you weren't in marketing, what would you be doing, Brian?
Fitness instructor or an actor?
Writing for TV.
Chinese medicine practitioner.
Psychologist.
God, quite an array. One career advice to new marketers, Maria.
Integrity, always.
Curiosity, always.
Run.
Act like a human, look at work like humans, treat people like humans, makes a big difference.
Okay. Name a personal guilty pleasure or indulgence brand.
Cinnabon.
Bandolier.
Nutella.
The brand doing it best right now, and again, you cannot say your own.
Cove soda from Halifax. Incredible.
Rick Rubin's Tetragrammaton. Check it out.
Gap.
NFL built a sport to an entertainment platform really well. International expansion, leveraging personalities of their sport like others don't. Really great.
Okay, and then the last one, and why we're all here today, the secret ingredient to brand love is?
Knowing your brand, knowing your consumer, and how those come together.
Patience.
Respect.
Trust.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so some really interesting answers that I wish I could dig into more there, but we're going to dive into our discussion questions. So I first want to talk about how you define love in the context of brands. And Brian, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I mean, I don't think you need to add the in the context of brands to the answer, because love between a consumer and a brand is not that dissimilar from love between two humans. There's trust, there's shared interest, there's mutual understanding, there's dialogue. And it really comes down to me, is how close the consumer feels to a brand. And that can show up in a ton of different ways, whether that's, being, if you love a brand, you're going to choose it no matter how cheap the competitor is. It's a brand, a brand you love is one you see post on social media and you're not annoyed by it. It's the one that you get irrationally upset with when they disappoint you, because when you care, your expectations are higher. And so that's what it comes down to for me, is that a brand, like brand love is closeness, brand love is mutual shared understandings, and consumers seek out brands that have strong values, strong identities that they can associate with. So I don't really think it's that different from a love between two people. Maybe a little bit less awkward family dinners, but otherwise it's really similar.
So lots of nods from the rest of you. How do you feel?
So I would build on that to say respect for me is the integral part. And again, similar to any relationship, and what is important in love is that sense of respect. I have the luxury, privilege of working for a brand where we get to tell the stories of real humans a whole lot, and their experience in our case with mental illness and mental health. And I think for us, and the love that we receive is when we've been able to create a story that allows people to truly identify their own personal experience with what they're seeing the brand represent. And I do think that that is relatable across different types of brands. It may not be as sort of deeply personal. It may be more, a luxury choice. Yes, that's what I want to feel. But it comes down to respectfully being able to tell those stories.
I think what I would add, my experience, so I work for Budweiser and also for Greenhouse Juice, is that when I talk to consumers about Greenhouse, I work at Greenhouse, or have you tried Greenhouse? The word that comes is like, I love Greenhouse. And it's like, but why do you love so deeply Greenhouse? And I did a massive research with 2,000 consumers that have tried Greenhouse in the past 3 months. And something that came up is that they made it part of their ritual. It's part of their daily lifestyle. They identify to it. So that brand love came identifying with the brand is part of my daily habit, is part of my ritual, but I also trust the brand, and that's what I go to trust. Then I work at Budweiser, and then there are not many that love Budweiser, but love the experience that Budweiser provide. And Budweiser is a very well-known brand. And I think that is this, like how it become part of your lifestyle, and then you actually identify with the brand. And then that identifies because you trust in the brand. You trust that what you put in your body, the ingredients, is the best quality. And I think that's at the core why, like when I asked, there hasn't been one person that have talked about Greenhouse that, doesn't show any excitement, like right away. And I was so impressed because I've never been in a brand where 95% is affinity and 95% of brand love. It's just incredible. And I think it goes back to the trust to the brand, and then also like how this affinity to, yes, it's part of my lifestyle, and I love it, and I identify with it.
And how does a brand go from being simply liked or known to a love brand? Like, how do you kind of take that step?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the second part of your other answer, where it's like you go from a brand that's liked when you're winning the rational mind. This is something that's practical. This is something that works. This is something that is dependable, convenient, known. But to go to loved, it's where you build that identity that you're talking about. And I've built this set of brand values that I, am investing in and I'm driving consistency against. A liked brand is memorable. A loved brand is part of memories. A known brand, you have awareness of. A loved brand, you invite into your house. And so I think that's where when you're able to get someone to go from the rational side of thinking about something to the more emotional thinking, that's where you get people making decisions like, you know what, if Heinz ketchup isn't there, I'm actually not even buying ketchup today, which is a completely illogical choice when you think about ketchup being a standard of identity in Canada. But when you have that brand love, that's what it allows you to do.
I think there's something here that's really important about listening and being able to have an open conversations, no matter what you're talking about, that are really hard, and looking at the truth face on. And given the opportunity we have with the investment we have in brand money to go out into market, using that responsibly to open those conversations. It may be tricky, certainly true for our brand, but I can see how it would be beneficial across this amazing panel here.
I would say consistency is similar on what share. I staying true to that brand root and then being consistent in the way it show up. Specifically working for a brand that, in my past 10 years working for brands that are very limited with resources and fun, like being very strategic and stay true to that brand root is critical, and keep a consistency on that.
And then, Maria, you talked a bit about trust already, and I think that's such an interesting relationship between trust and love and just overall brand affinity. Do you think one is a prerequisite for the other?
Well, I've been thinking about that because I can trust on a brand, but not necessarily love. Like I trust RBC or banking, and sorry for my banking team, but I don't love RBC. But I cannot love a brand without the trust. So I think that trust is important. And for example, brands such as banking or RBC, like they start building like the love from experiences and better services and being present in key moment and milestone in your life. But it goes back to trust is number one, is the core of it, and then how you identify with the brand is what builds this perfect coalition of building that brand love.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I completely agree. I can trust a brand without loving it. I can't love a brand without trusting it. And some brands actually take a shortcut to get to that love without having built that trust. And that can be a dangerous place to play. And I think the best examples of those are celebrity brands. They borrow the equity from a great celebrity, and the celebrity, is a loved celebrity that consumers associate with, and then the brand sucks. And then you quickly, that love that you built so quickly without said trust or utility, as Jeff said, like it is so quickly forfeited. So no brand love, no brand trust anymore, and you quickly go from being the hot, trusted or loved brand to one that's not even in consideration sets anymore.
And looking at brand affinity as a whole, and obviously that's sort of made up a lot of factors, like what do you think is the most underrated emotional driver of brand affinity today?
I think go back to identity and a feeling that this brand represents you, that you are proud to carry this brand, that you're proud to been drinking that product. Like I think identity is the word that comes to my mind.
I mean, I really hammered in on underrated. So there's a lot of big drivers, I think, for brand love and brand affinity. But to me, one of the most underrated things is showing up in moments that matter. And then when you do, adding value in those moments. A lot of brands, we're guilty of it too, where we invest so much time, energy, and effort into the big Super Bowl ad or the grand gesture that's going to earn a ton of attention. But if you think about, brand love similar to love between two people, yeah, the diamond ring's amazing, but it's all the little things that led up to that actually build that brand love. And it can't just be a brand being a squeaky wheel. People expect brands to be present, but presence without value is just noise. And so it's really important for us to think about as we're showing up with our brands, like, why are you there and how are you going to add value to consumers? It doesn't need to be radical. Could be a recipe, could be a tip, could be a smile. But I think the brands that really are able to build love consistently are the ones that are showing up in moments that matter for their consumers and adding that little bit of value.
Yeah, and coming at this again from a slightly different position, I feel like this is an overused word, but it's such because it's so important, that the authenticity that people can connect to in the conversation. So I'm looking at my beloved Guybrush back there, and he and I worked on a conversation that hadn't been had at all, really, in the public domain for about a year and a half to get it out into the world against a whole lot of fear and pushback from the brand ownership. But we knew it was critically important to authentically connect with the real experience of people who were facing and contemplating suicide as an option for them. And it works because you're talking about something people need and want you to talk about. So there's different versions of that depending on where you're coming from, but it's that authentic listening, which I totally agree with, and then being willing to do things that may not appear at first to be in line with the data, the brand overarching directive of the company, but really pushing hard. That's where we have some responsibility, I think.
And this leads nicely actually into one of my next questions. How do you decide which cultural conversations your brand should enter and which to avoid?
At Greenhouse, we don't jump in all conversations, but we do have very, very, very clear brand roots, and those are the ones that we always talk about. We are all about organic. We are all about fighting plastic pollution. We are all about supporting local and also building healthy habits. And we stay true to that conversation. For more that and we work with agencies and we have amazing content creators, and there's so many ideas to jump into other conversation on what is trending, but we being able to be very clear that this is our 4 brand roots and this is what we stand for, and we stay consistent to that communication. And we will put 10 times more effort to really fight against plastic pollution. And yes, we will have very hard conversation about, okay, the 2 biggest plastic polluters in the world is Coca-Cola and PepsiCo. So how do we address that conversation? We prefer to put 10 times more effort to that conversation than just jumping into what is trending in the week. And I think that go back to why we have the trust that we have. That's why consumer identify with our brand, and identity is very strong for those that believe on those values that we have in the organization.
Yeah, I think to build off that, it's having a clear understanding of your brand's point of view. And it can sometimes be a little bit abstract when you think about, Kraft dinner, for example. Like what's Kraft's dinner's point of view? We have cheese or noodles. And so what we do as an exercise at Kraft Heinz is a lot of times we try to build our brands into personas. If Kraft dinner was a person, who are they following on social media? If Kraft dinner was a person, who are they hanging out with? What are they talking about when they're at a party? Those types of things. And it starts to shape a worldview beyond a product, especially when we don't, not all of our brands have these higher cost purposes, like you're talking about with green juice, but that doesn't mean we still can't participate in culture. Because if you don't have that, every conversation becomes tempting. I'm sure we've all had that time where a boss has come to us and be like, oh, like the Jays are in Game 7 of the World Series, what's your brand doing about it? I don't know, nothing. We've never talked about baseball before. Or our consumer is an 80-year-old woman. They don't even know, they aren't interested in baseball. Because that's the second thing, is that you know what your brand stands for, what your brand's interests are, and what are your consumers interested in. And the magic happens is when you intersect between the two. And then it's prioritizing, it's what's going to actually move the needle versus what's just going to make distraction and noise. Brand safety is important, but to me the bigger risk isn't controversy, it's actually irrelevance.
So I'm going to risk educating y'all a little bit on how the healthcare system's funded as a way to answer this question. I didn't know this before I joined CAMH before. The government funds part of what we do, but not a lot. And they fund less when it comes to mental health. So we are not afraid of having any conversation. In fact, we need to have those because we hold the responsibility to bust stigma, build awareness, educate, as well as advertise and raise money. But where we run into a question of how we have the conversation is when we contemplate ensuring that our government partners, who we respect dearly, are not going to be upset or feel criticized by the fact that we also need to raise money to do all of the amazing things that are not funded by the government. So it's a bit more nuanced, and we always find a way.
Okay, and I'd love to hear a bit more about the brands that you work with, either today or previous brands you've worked with. And Jeff, this will be kind of more of a question for different brands that you've worked with at your time at TikTok or other agencies. So what's one strategic choice your brand made that meaningfully increased consumer love?
No, not ready. Not ready yet.
No.
I can start. I think we have a really great case study example. Many of you may have followed along the journey, but it's really around Heinz ketchup. Heinz ketchup sets a stage, 150-year-old brand, #1 player in ketchup by quite a long shot, beloved Canadian brand for decades. And then, in 2015, around then, we made a decision that broke brand trust, where we moved production out of Canada to the US. And that started something that's been dubbed the ketchup wars, which is crazy, especially in this time and age. But we saw market share decline. We saw brand love go down. And our comment section on Facebook was a very spooky place to be. And at the time, the team's focus was, we need to rebuild brand love by building that one-on-one connection with consumers. And so it was a lot of experiential efforts, which was very successful, but the challenge is it wasn't scalable. And so you were able to impact a very small portion of the population, and so it didn't actually drive the results that we were looking to do or reignite that brand love. And so around that time, I came onto the business and I took a look at what we were doing, and I realized that we were focusing far too much on trying to fix our mistakes, when in reality what we needed to do was remind consumers why they fell in love with us in the first place. They didn't love Heinz ketchup because we were made in Canada. They loved Heinz ketchup because we were great tasting, thick, delicious ketchup. So we need to lean into that. And the how was so important too, because if you've pissed off a lot of people and you come out and just say, I'm the best, like you're gonna piss them off more. So what we really wanted to do, and it kind of comes back to tapping into conversations versus forcing conversations, is find ways to hack culture, to tap into conversations that allow our brand to be a part of culture and in ways that make consumers smile. If what we're doing isn't gonna make someone smile, I don't wanna do it. And we stopped trying to talk about made in Canada. And so we told stories from unexpected perspectives, like the potato becoming a French fry and falling in love with ketchup again. And we answered the age-old question around what's the best way to get Heinz ketchup out of that glass bottle, when we tilted the label on it and turned a consumer pain point into a design exercise. We reminded consumers of our place in culture by building the first branded IMDb page around the Oscars, because we've been in more movies than anyone. And then, in COVID, everyone went to that message. They stopped and with those somber messages, we're all in this together. And it was a lot of noise pollution, like we talk about. And we're Heinz ketchup. Like, yeah, we're in it with you guys, but we're not solving the healthcare challenges. And so we decided to have a conversation about a re-emerging trend, which was puzzles. And we built the world's slowest puzzle, 570 pieces, all Heinz red. Which is funny, but it also reinforces our brand positioning. And this idea of building work and culture that makes Canadians and consumers smile laid the foundations for a lot of things that you're seeing today from the brand, but also it started to reignite that brand love. And most importantly, I'm really proud that we've taken a much larger step too in regaining that trust when we moved Heinz ketchup production back to Canada. So all of Heinz ketchup is now made by Canadians for Canadians in Canada with Canadian tomatoes. But it really wasn't until we stopped focusing on trying to fix our mistakes that we were able to reignite that brand love, because we leaned into what consumers loved us for in the first place.
I am a puzzle person, and no thank you. That sounds horrible. So I mentioned the Not Suicide, Not Today campaign that Guy Rush and I and many other people built together. I think we were planning to launch that campaign, you know the rest of the sentence, in the early spring of 2020. I was brought on to CAMH Foundation by the board they were finally going to put some money, millions of dollars, behind brand marketing. And I'd started not even a year before that. And they were putting immense trust, because this is donor money and they'd never done brand marketing before. So there was a big process to get this campaign built. And I will never forget the day when my son is in the next room fighting with his computer, and I'm looking at a screen of board members and saying, we can't launch this right now. People cannot handle this beautiful thing that we've built that I feel so passionately about, and I know is going to help a lot of people. They can't do a conversation about suicide. But if you give me a few tens of thousands of dollars, we can do something else. And we built in record time a campaign called Apart Not Alone. And we deployed resources out to the public digitally that were intended to assist them in managing their isolation and the struggles we were having at that time. And it built us a lot of love. And it also solidified a structure and an ethos that I've since then been able to more easily convince the board is important. And that is, anytime we're spending money and going out to market, we have to be delivering something useful to our public, because it's our responsibility. We have the information people need and want, and it's all tested, and we're a research hospital, so it's the best information there is in the world, but also because it builds love. If we do this for people, they're going to help us. They're going to understand how important our cause is.
The best example that I can provide, and it's similar to Brian's, is on Budweiser. So Budweiser, 150 years old brand, very hockey male oriented, and we needed to get into the love of younger consumer. We were not winning with younger consumer. And we decided to, for first time, tap into the passion point of younger, at that time, younger millennials, to music. But here's the big piece. Imagine Budweiser, Labatt, lots of money. we can do any partnership, right? Partnership is lazy. Like here's your contract, you get 10 tickets and you get 100,000 billboards. But what we did, specifically in Quebec, where we were losing brand love, was that we participated in a meaningful way. We decided, Budweiser decided to reopen in a very iconic venue in Quebec, a music venue called Videotron. And on top of that, we brought Metallica to Quebec. At that time, rock genre was the #1 genre in Quebec. I don't know if it's still the same, but we brought Metallica and we did a commemorative can brew with the vibration of Metallica and the reopening of the Videotron. And all that, it grew, like in that market, it grew 3 points of market share, brand love, and acceptance of the Quebec consumer. They're very loyal to their brands to give us a chance. But it goes back to A, all brand can rethink itself. B, that if you participate in a meaningful way, that it really elevates the consumer and elevate the experience and elevate the community, you can create a great impact. And I think that that genuine participation and creating that experience for the Quebec consumers in that moment with the right mix of bringing this amazing Metallica and opening the Videotron and creating these commemorative cans really elevated and gave Budweiser an opportunity to bring brand love to younger and to that a community.
And when you think, obviously, each of you are sort of at different sized businesses. So how do you stay human and relatable at scale?
We, on our social channel, we let the consumer lead all conversation. We for good or for bad comment, like we don't remove anything. I would say 80% of our content, it comes from people that wants to share about our product in a good, in a bad, in a mid way, in any way. And I think that's the way to keep it human. Also, now that you can create so many AI assets and content, that for us to stay authentic is to let the flow of all these comment coming in, and knowing that it might be good comment, bad comment, great comment, but that's the way that people are experiencing the brand, and then stay authentic to continue sharing how the consumers feel about our product, because it can be very confusing with all this AI world on what is real and what is not.
I think that as your opportunities expand and your worldview has to expand as well. And so what was important in how you positioned your brand when it was this small is naturally going to need to shift and change as you grow. So staying super curious and asking a lot of questions and not assuming ever that you know better than where you're going.
I love that, because it kind of is, when you build a brand in the first place, you need to have a product or brand promise, why you exist, and consumers fall in love with that. And brands that scale quickly can sometimes forget that in the desire to chase the next shiny object, and they build a strategy in a boardroom that they can talk themselves into, but then it goes to a consumer and they're like, what the heck what are you doing? And they're not afraid to call us out, consumers, for sure. And to me, the best example of this is one that some of you may not even heard of, because it's one of the biggest failed brand expansions ever. Colgate in the 60s, I think it was. Colgate's known for what? Oral care, toothpaste, minty fresh, and they decided they wanted to own, the strategy was, we own the mouth before bed. We should own the mouth during mealtime. And so what they did is they're like, we should launch frozen meals. I look it up, I swear, it exists. And it's one of those things where in a boardroom, it made sense. Everyone was nodding along, we're gonna own that whole journey. But when a consumer knows you as minty fresh, they sure as hell don't want you to be making their meals, their dinners. And so it failed because they didn't listen to their consumers. And so that's my biggest thing. As you scale, in order to remain human, stay true to who you are, but then also grow with your consumers, not grow away from them. And it really requires that deep understanding of how they see your brand.
I want to shift gears a bit, because we've talked a lot about the emotional side of brand love. I want to talk about the science behind it and talk about how we measure it. And then that measurement piece, how do you also sell it into the board, the businesses, the CFOs?
For me, a metric that I use is a Net Promoter Score. And we do this biannually. And would you recommend this brand to your friends and family? And I think that show advocacy, that show the brand love, the trust to the brand. And I think that's a very, very important metric. And at the same time, similar to what Jeff or Brian mentioned, is about like listening to the consumer. Like the answer is there. Really setting time, and I know we are all have very busy life, but setting once a year or twice a year, just sit down and get a few consumers to talk to you about the product, I think is very, very critical.
For us, it's about whether the hospital is able to do what it needs to do to support the public, both on our site at Queen and Ossington, but also throughout Canada and even globally around policy, et cetera. So we get a list. We're building buildings. That's a really good measure of success for us because we were tasked with making sure those could happen. And there's a time horizon involved. So yes, as a marketer, I'm looking at the same data we all are about which lever is working and where to adjust, et cetera. But at the end of the day, we need to do the good work to help people who are sick.
Yeah, I mean, we have all sorts of different studies that help us measure this. Our brand value creation study that talks about salience, your top of mind, difference, are you different, which is a lot of utility, and then meaningfulness is a big driver, how close do consumers feel to your brand. But I really liked your point around comment section. And we have an example that helped us really know, like this with this Heinz ketchup journey that we've been on, was back, I guess, early 2015, or 2025, I should say, when the president in the US decided to come out and say, we're gonna tariff everyone. And the first thing that Trudeau said is like, oh, you should buy local, like French's instead of Heinz. We're like, dude, like we make ketchup like 10 kilometers from your riding. But either way, and so what was really interesting and when we know we were starting to drive success with brand love was that when people were jumping in on comments saying, hey, like you don't make it in Canada, you're an American brand, we actually had consumers jumping in and defending us and educating other consumers because we were able to build that brand love with them. We never would have saw that previously. And so again, that was a really cool, qualitative, if you will say, measure of like, have we grown and fixed some of that brand love?
Learned the hard way, was at Blackberry for a decade. I require a bottle of wine to have discussion about Blackberry. And one of the things we learned the very hard way was we did not at all times respect the relationships we were building with people who were in control positions of what conversation was happening in the media. And you can do that until you can't. You can do it while you're beloved, but as soon as you have an issue and you need people on side, you better have built those relationships with respect and humility and all of those important things we talked about around trust, love, etc. Because you never know when you're going to be in a hard position. So I'd add that little tidbit.
Okay, so what new signal or metric do you think will matter most in the next few years?
I've been thinking a lot about it. Like, will my brand be recommended by the AI assistant? Like how? Like, it's very hard right now to really define that next metric when all this AI platform, which now we are using every day, is will my brand show up as a recommendation when I put in the chat box? Like with the assistant Rufu or Sparky or whatever other name out there will recommend my brand to consumers because that's gonna be the behavior of shopping and informing and getting to know a brand or trying a new product.
I think it's relevance beyond borders, however you currently define your constituent base. We need to think more broadly and assume that everybody can have an opinion and may, and we got to watch that.
Okay, so we got to our closing question. If you could give one piece of advice to a founder building a brand from scratch, what would it be?
I have two because I'm going to break the rules. First one is be curious. I think that far too often when you're building a brand, if you're the brand founder or the brand manager, I have to come in and I have to have the answers. But that's not your job. Your job is to build an environment that allows you, your partners, your customers, your consumers to discover those answers. Don't just look in your categories. Don't just look at what you've done. Look, like we have so much data at our fingertips now, so being curious is really important. And then I think, Jeff, you mentioned it earlier about being choiceful. This is one that I find is the biggest mistake that brand marketers, whether you're a founder or a brand manager, fall into, is I want everyone to love my brand. And a brand that tries to make everyone love them is loved by no one. And so it's being choiceful of like, who am I for? And then just as importantly, who am I not for? And Jeff used the example already, but Liquid Death is the best at this. They are a brand that they're not a polite water brand. They've built an identity. They built a purpose that people that like them just are obsessed. But people that don't like them hate them. And that's cool. And they've built a successful business on that. And so I think being curious allows you to start to build your brand, but being choiceful gives you the ability to sustain it.
What I would add, I have worked for 5 founders in my career, so it has been a very unique experience. And the common thread that I see in these 5 founders is that they're fighting for something, or they're fighting for the consumer, or they're fighting for the industry, or they're fighting for something better. And that is like what intrinsically moves that passion and that everyday push. So for those that are creating a brand, what are you fighting for? That is it's gonna be your next 10 years passion, energy, how you're gonna bring people together and how you're gonna talk about your brand. And it's been very rewarding and coming from big CPG companies to a small organizations and seeing CEOs, founder passion for that fight. And most of that fight is the fight for bringing something better to the consumer. So I think that is what it carries, that DNA for so long. And then you see these founders really every day with the same energy as they started in day one.
I'm going to be a fast follower and say 2. The first one is trust your instincts. If you're a good marketer, and these folks certainly are, and y'all, I'm guessing, are too, you're there because you have an instinct about what's going to work. Yes, you have to look at the data. It's not throwing it away, but follow that instinct. We don't do that enough. And then the other one comes from experience. I was also working at with the Kielburger brothers, and that requires even stronger medication to talk about. But do not be arrogant. Be humble. And always, as you said, be curious. You don't know everything. So yes, it's that combo of trust the gut and be humble.
I love that. The trusting the gut. It's sometimes you see a creative presentation, you see something, you feel something. It's like, good. That's how consumers are going to see it. It's not going to be, they're not psychoanalyzing like, well, was the branding in the first 6 seconds? No, it's like, oh yeah, I feel something. So trusting that gut is so important. Love that.
Okay, we have a little bit of time for some questions from the audience. So Lauren's going to come round. Okay, so again, just for the video, is it more important to notice the brand or the product and the content?
If you're looking for brand love, I think it's around the content first, and then people will seek out what the brand is and fall in love because there's connecting with the content. But
yeah, to me, it depends on the business objective and the brand objective. If I am launching a new product into a new category and you only take away the brand, I failed. And so I do think that depending on what your brand objective is and your business objectives, we're launching a new product, you need to know what that product is, why it's important, and ultimately also what brand it's from. So there's certain things that you can do for that. And so I think sometimes what marketers can fall in the trap of is what would work well for an equity campaign or a brand whose goal is not necessarily awareness or education may not work well when you do need to drive that awareness and education about said product.
Yeah, similar to Brian, for small brands that have worked in the past, you're now in the stage of building the brand equity. Like that takes lots of money and investment behind it. But what I will say, for example, a greenhouse, it has been the product. The fire ginger the product is equal to the love and then getting to know the brand because the product works, because people trust that product. So the product have brought the awareness of the brand. And it's interesting because coming from a big CPG company, the first thing that you think is that upper funnel is all about that brand awareness and building the equity of the brand. But when you're a very, very small company, the product is gonna do the hard work. And then the product comes to, like, does it work? Like, is it good? Like, are people loving it? What comments are people sharing? How they are using it? So I think that the heavy lift comes from the product, and then it goes to the ladder to build that brand awareness and equity.
Okay, we are at time, so we're going to leave it there. Massive thank you to our panelists. This was such an interesting conversation. You've left me a lot to think about. And thank you again, everyone, for coming, and you're supporting such an incredible cause. We have this space until 11, so if you can, stick around. We are going to change the screen shortly to our next event. It's going to be all about female icons and male-dominated industries. That's going to be on April 1st. So there's going to be a QR code that's going to go up. So if you can attend that event, we'd love to see you there, and look out for more information on who our speakers are going to be. Thank you.